In this video, I'm going to show you how to make an all-in-one facing, which finishes off the neckline and the armhole. We'll start off by drawing around the parts that we want the facing to attach to. So that's the neckline, the shoulder, and the armhole, plus the side seam and the centre front. Making sure to mark in any notches as well. We're going to extend that side seam down to the top notch where the dart starts. Ideally, you don't really want to extend it any further, otherwise you've got to consider adding in the volume of the dart into the facing. But we'll explore that in the next video. Next, you want to draw around the back to create the back facing. So we're going to draw the neckline, the shoulder with the notch, the armhole, and the side seam down to the bust notch. And then we're going to draw in the centre back seam and extend the line a little further down than the back neck opening notch. We're going to be using the facing to finish off the back neck notch, as well as the neckline and armhole. Next, we want to mark on the centre front line where we want our facing to end. Now we want to ideally have the facing go up and over the bust so it's not incorporating any of the bust volume. This will make sure it sits neatly in the top part of our chest. So make sure that you're squaring off at a 90-degree angle at the centre front. And create a smooth hemline joining the centre front to the side seam. We're also making sure that we square off at the side seam as well, where this will join to the back. And then at the back, we're extending the facing down about 2 to 3 centimetres below where that back neck notch is. And then we're going to connect the centre back to the side seam again with a smooth line, making sure that we're squaring off at 90 degrees at the side seam and at the centre back. You can see here that the side seam isn't squared off on the front facing, so I'm just going to square that off and then just drop the hemline down slightly to create that nice smooth curve. By making sure that the side seams are at 90 degrees, it ensures a nice smooth flow from the front to the back, creating a nice smooth line where the pieces join. So next we can add our seam allowances. We want to add seam allowances to every edge which joins to another edge. So that will be our shoulder seams and side seams, and our centre back seam. But we don't want to add any seam allowance to the centre front because this is placed on the fold. We'll add a little arrow and marking here to remind us to cut this on the fold when we're cutting out our fabric. Next, you can continue to add your seam allowances to all your other edges. For this facing, I am going to add a seam allowance to the bottom edge of the facing because I plan to turn this to the inside of the facing and then top stitch it in place. However, if you're finishing off the lower edge of your facing with a binding or overlocking or even simply pinking, well then you can leave off the seam allowance at this lower edge. Once you're happy with your facing, you can mark in with a darker pen, making sure that you're transferring all the notches as well. And then double check to make sure that everything fits well against your original pattern. Now there is one final thing that I like to do on my facings, especially when they're attaching to the neckline and the armhole and finishing these edges off. I like to trim off 2 to 3 millimeters from the neckline and the armhole, and this helps to just pull the facing onto the inside of the garment to create a really neat finish. Finally, I'll just check that the front and back facings match up where they're going to be joined together. So I can see there's a little bit of a discrepancy, the front being a little bit bigger than the back, so I'm just going to trim that off. Checking the pattern like this is called truing the pattern. And you should do it with any pieces that are going to join to, and you should do this with any pieces that are going to join to each other. So I'm checking the shoulder seams, and then I'm also going to check the side seams as well. I'm happy that these are going to join with a nice smooth line and create a beautiful facing.